Nani, my friends. So, today we're talking about my own experiences with cryptids on the reserve and how it led to that, and a little bit background story about myself. You know, I really don't rehearse these things. It's just too much to say. I'm too lazy for that. I ain't got the time for that. So let's jump right into it. While working and living on a native reserve north of Sudbury, Ontario, near Espanola or Massey, I heard many interesting stories about Bigfoot, serpents, little people, and more. Either from the family I was staying with, in-laws at the time, or from local natives themselves. Now, I know I posted a little poll for you guys to pick a topic about giants for me to talk about, but those stories take a lot of time for me to do research on. You know, I want to cover the full subject thoroughly. It takes me a long time to create those, so I wanted to make a video where I get to just talk about my experiences and perhaps give you a little insight on my own creation story. Before I go into these accounts of cryptids I've heard, I would like to give you some background info on the Anishinaabe, or you can say the Ojibwe people of Canada, and more specifically Northern Ontario. People of the Great Lakes region, or more specifically the Algoma district is where I stayed, and my life there, so that these stories will make more sense to you and perhaps hold some accountability. So if I just told you these stories I heard, you're like, why would you know those, right? Well, I'll kind of lead on to that. And in fact, I'll kind of describe things from around the world that relate to their creation stories and how these stories reflect stories from around the world. If you watch my videos, you'll know that all these stories are similar all around the world, right? Solomon Islands, Kandahar Giant, they're all the same. I was dating a native girl who was in environmental science at a school I will not mention. I want to keep everyone here confidential as I can. We were into the same things, spending our time exploring the Kawartha Lakes and Highlands. That's in Ontario here. Catching critters like amphibians and reptiles. That's what we were mostly into. Frogs, snakes, turtles. She was mostly into reptiles, like snakes and turtles. She was an expert on them, right? Having been part of M&R and turtle conservation, right? She's caught every snake here in Ontario, including the blue racer, which I'll talk about. We would travel to the Algoma area where her reserve was, staying at her family's cottage and exploring the area like Killarney, that's north of Sudbury, Chutes National Park, around the same area, the La Cloche Mountains, whom we climbed with her brother, and my favorite, Manitoulin Island. It's the biggest freshwater island in the world, is Manitoulin Island, whom its rich native heritage so Manitoulin Island has rich native heritage, perhaps descended from the ancient Clovis culture. I love the Cusp and Saucer Nature Reserve with its many stunning cliffs and cliffside caves, which we would explore. It's very interesting to explore the Cup and Saucer Trail. I'm sure if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. You climb these cliffs to get on top of it, and when you get on top of it, there's a great view. But when you climb these cliffs to get on top of it, there's these side little caves, and you can peek out from the cliffside from these caves, and you can actually climb through some of these caves to get on top of it. Beautiful. That whole area is littered with Indian arrowheads. And you know, you see the holes, I forget what they're called, but there's little holes in the rock, in the granite rock or whatever, in the shield, where they use these holes to make tools or ground up things. I don't know. The whole area is littered with Indian arrowheads. We would also come up with ideas for scripts for Oak Island films. which is a branch of the BBC. Not that BBC, all right? Filming in North America. And they stole all our ideas, right? We came up with lots of unique ideas about things that would be cool to film here in North America, right? A lot of people don't know about all the beautiful salamanders we have, right? And we came up with all sorts of different ideas for them, and you stole it. She was working for the producer since they needed a native contact, and I would eavesdrop on all her research interviews with the best biologists and researchers in their fields across Canada and the US. So she would interview these top researchers in their field, right? The top elk researcher, top bat researcher. And, I'm a nerd, so I would listen, right? Whether it would be about massive beaver dams altering our landscapes out west. These beaver dams are huge, right? And it changes the landscape once they build them. Whales on our coasts. Elk repopulation. Fungal disease affecting our bats, or thousands of miles of subterranean freshwater river systems spanning underneath Quebec, with enough water to overfill Lake Superior, and containing a unique mollusk with an extraordinary predatory ability. So this mollusk lives in complete darkness and has a very unique way of predation. And I'll try to show that in the images here. But so basically, this was the most interesting thing I learned, was that underneath Quebec, there are subterranean river systems underneath the land. And these rivers and waterways are so huge that there's actually enough water in these underground river systems to overfill Lake Superior. There's more water in there than Lake Superior. That's a lot of water, right? Lake Superior is our deepest lake. It's one of the deepest lakes in the world. I believe one lake is deeper in Russia or something. So I'm a huge nerd, and I loved helping her with this work. We even got a chance to be part of the film crew on Pelee Island, or Point Pelee, where we made our film script come to life by attempting to film Ontario's fastest snake, the blue racer, which we did not find. So we came up with this idea because basically the TV is all about excitement and novelty and violence, really. So they want to film things that are cool, like they want to see the fastest snake catching its prey. I'll get into that later more, but a lot of it is fake, pretty much. But we did go to the island. We tried to find the snake, and we couldn't find it. Right? It's endangered. I think it's very rare. It only exists on Pelee Island. However, we did capture footage of Ontario's only lizard, the five-lined skink. It only lives on Pelee Island. And our only cactus, the prickly pear cactus. I mentioned these in my previous videos. And they only live on Pelee Island because it's the southernmost tip of Ontario. It's so far south in Ontario that it actually has its own climate, a different climate from the rest of us. It has enchanting jungle-like bogs, having a climate similar to North Carolina. Immediately you could tell it's different here, right? You go into it's all marshes and wetlands and bogs, and these bogs are just giant deciduous trees growing in them, and you got like a bog underneath with lots of vegetation. It's nothing. It's like nowhere else in Ontario. It's beautiful. If you haven't been there, I highly suggest you go to Pelee Island. You take a little ferry there, and go for a walk, go for a little bike. So but we did see the lizard there. We took some photos, obviously, and we filmed it, and we saw the cactus there. I even got to handle this $200,000 camera that's only made in Bristol, England, because that's where the BBC is made, right? Not Africa, right? This is Bristol, England. And, I remember one time the camera guy's flying this drone, and then he was about to lose it in the block, and I'm trying to catch it. Wasn't able to catch it, but I was a little scared, right? Because I don't want to cut my fingertips off. But we had a great time there. I even went to BC with her to attend the climate summit she was invited to. And BC is just beautiful, right? It's amazing to see the giant sequoia trees, the giant redwoods in Stanley Park. That's all we went to. We were stuck inside the city, but just Stanley Park alone is beautiful. It's like it's another rainforest, right? I was catching crabs in the ocean in the dead of January, and wading through the ocean in my t-shirt and shorts in January. You lift up one rock, and there's like 1,000 crabs underneath there, I'm not used to the ocean, right? And we got to see a native museum with artifacts from the Haida people. I mentioned that in my previous videos, the Haida natives, with their massive ancestral totems, their giant totem poles, huge, right? They're made from the same sequoias, and just as massive ocean-faring canoes made from the same trees. Their canoes are a lot bigger, these dugout canoes. They're made from these giant sequoia trees. You can actually go into the ocean and can travel long distances. So from her work and film, I learned a lot. A lot of it is scripted. A lot of film, a lot of wildlife documentaries is all scripted. For example, if they can't get a footage of a certain thing, like it might show an eagle hopping off a branch to go hunt its prey, and then it'll show another footage of the eagle flying away with the prey. But really what they did is they put a dead animal there. Like it'll show the rabbit, right? The live rabbit, and it'll cut to the eagle flying away with a dead rabbit, because that's actually a different rabbit. There's a lot of laws around filming, especially here in North America, right? You can't actually film animals getting hurt, I can't even say the word, otherwise I get shadow banned, right? I'm already shadow banned, probably. So, it's all fake, pretty much, right? They use cutscenes from different footages. They'll buy footages from other people and use that in their film. And, they'll use setups to mimic nature, such as they'll film inside the terrarium. But it's a terrarium, right? They plant the plants there. They use they make it look real. They'll film in terrariums and aquariums, right? I remember the boss wanted her to use her native status, so that's why they wanted to hire her. Partially because she is in environmental science, but also with her native status, she can kind of gain access to a lot of things to be filmed. Having a native status here in Canada, you're kind of like you have access to certain things, and so they wanted to use her native status and connections to smuggle timberland rattlesnakes from the States, from the US, onto her reserve. If you know from my previous videos, the timberland rattlesnake, the 6-foot long rattlesnake, is extradited from Ontario. It doesn't exist here anymore. It's extinct. But out in the States, they're still, you guys did good, we killed them all. So they wanted her to bring these rattlesnakes back to Canada onto her reserve, which is obviously illegal. You can't just bring venomous snakes through the border. You're not supposed to bring species across borders, right? Could be invasive species and stuff. Although the snake was originally from here. So they wanted her to bring these snakes back from the States, probably from a native reserve to her native reserve, where she would breed them in captivity and eventually release them. It's all for TV, right? They wanted this for TV. Everyone was against this crazy idea, including her parents, and everyone was like, well, don't do this. But honestly, I was all for it. I was like, do this, Ron. You gotta do this. You gotta be the Timberland rattlesnake queen, So this was during the time of COVID and Tiger King, right? This is when there's a Tiger King documentary, right? About all the things he's doing. I'm like, yo, you gotta be the rattlesnake queen. This was during COVID and Tiger King. The snakes were part of Ontario's ecosystem. They were originally from Ontario, and they would most likely balance out the invasive European rats and other rodent populations, which are now out of control. We have rodent infestation here in Ontario, and because of that, like in my previous videos, the one about the 23-foot long paddlefish, I talk about invasive species in our ecosystem and stuff. The rodents are out of control, and this reintroduction or repopulation of the snake here that originally existed here would help control these rodents, and therefore control the explosion tick and Lyme disease that's rampant here in Ontario and everywhere. I know in the States it's a big problem too, right? So, I think it would do some good. Will some people get bitten? Yeah, maybe, for sure, but especially, we're not used to these rattlesnakes anymore. But I think it'll do more good than damage, Somebody, if M&R is watching this, bring him back. When COVID hit, she no longer had to physically attend school. So we moved onto her parents' property on the reserve, where I helped renovate an old horse barn into a humble but beautiful home. A little house from an old horse barn. I built a small bear-proof chicken coop with a scrap wood and plexiglass left over from the house I built, without making a single cut. I didn't even cut any of the wood. I just found the right pieces. I made it nice. It had sidings, it had shingles, and a plexiglass window, a little bear-proof 2x4 kind of 2x4 drawbridge door, and another door that opened up. There's bears everywhere, man. It has to be bear-proof, so it has a drawbridge door, plexiglass window, and I had 3 hens I bought from the Mennonites nearby, and it was cool watching this little 5-year-old Mennonite girl in her little sundress, climbing around the barn. She hops on these 2x4s or 4x4s, and she's walking on the 4x4, because the Mennonites, they hang their chicken cages on the barn, right? So she's reaching into these chicken cages, grabbing my hens. And I was like, whoa, man, this is a wild 5-year-old girl. She's running on the beams to get my 3 hens that I wanted. We even had a tiny bear cub living on the property. Like a baby bear cub. We saw it one day, and it just stayed on our property. It didn't have a mother, which we fed scraps and apples to from our apple trees, a couple of apple trees, because it obviously lost its mother, right? Probably some hunter unalived her. About a year later, we were sitting on the back porch facing the swamp, having a little smoke at night on the back porch. It just faces the swamp, and you can't see nothing, right? It's just a swamp. It's dark, right? Up north, it's dark. You can see the stars. So we're having a little smoke when I heard the faintest snap of a twig. I just heard like lighter than that, I just heard that, and immediately I knew. I just knew what it was. But I was hoping. I immediately knew what it was, but I was hoping it was a raccoon. I'm like, please be a raccoon. Even though we all know that up north, there's no raccoons. A lot of you don't know this, but up north, I didn't see no raccoons up north. I didn't see any raccoons up north. They are city animals. Gray squirrels, they're city animals. European squirrels, you only find them in the city. Up north, you get red squirrels. Raccoons and these squirrels, they're abundant here in the city because it's a good environment for them. They've adapted to living with us, right? Up north, there's no raccoons. There's 1 per 2 square kilometers, probably less. So I was hoping it was a raccoon, and I look up, and I just see 2 feet in front of me. I kid you not, like right here, 2 feet in front of my face. We're sitting side by side. The door's behind us on the porch, back porch, and 2 feet in front of me was a full-size, skinny-looking black bear, Mukwa, right? That's what they call bears in Ojibwe, Anishinaabe. Mukwa. It was a full-size, skinny-looking black bear. It was dark, but I could tell from the silhouette of the head and the ears, it was a bear. And I said, bear. And we got up and we bolted inside and slammed the doors. We never moved so fast in our lives. Like, we moved so fast. I said, bear. We were inside. Reflecting on the moment from the posture of its ears. Its ears are kind of perked up, perked forward. I don't know, right? But reflecting on the moment, it probably was just curious about the smell of the smoke. I think if it wanted to rip my face off, it would have done it. For those of you who don't know, yes, like the western brown bears, the big brown bears of BC, they can obviously do a lot more damage to humans. They're a lot bigger than our black bears here in Ontario, eastern black bear. But generally, black bears are more aggressive. Black bears actually attack humans more, right? In a lot of species of animals, the small ones are more aggressive, right? The small ones are more aggressive, right? You gotta be more aggressive to compete when you're a smaller animal. And kind of like the whole gentle giant idea, right? Now, don't get me fooled. I know in the comments, maybe I get no comments, but people will be like, "Oh, don't be stupid." And brown bear will eat you alive. Yeah, but chances are a brown bear won't attack you, and chances are a black bear will more likely attack you than a brown bear. Chances are they won't attack you, right? Maybe if you spook it, or it's with its cubs, a mother bear with its cubs, yeah, then that's a different story, which I have encountered before. And you are supposed to stay back. The cubs try to climb the tree, the mom's running around, like, that's a dangerous situation. See a lot of the bears up there, everywhere. So we also have moose. Black bear are common, especially in the landfill. There's a landfill on the reserve, and when you go into the landfill, sometimes there's like 5, 7, 8 bears there eating the garbage, right? Trash bears, garbage bears. They're on the landfill, on the reserve, and there's tons of turkey vultures circling up overhead, seagulls. We called that landfill, we called it Jurassic Park. That's what, I think that's what they call it. But it is Jurassic Park, man. You can go in there, all the seagulls are flying over here. And you see like turkey vultures with their giant wingspan. They look like eagles. And you see the bears. You don't want to get too close. People don't even want to go dump their garbage. Her dad would be like, I gotta dump the garbage. And deal with the black bears. We call that Jurassic Park. There would be deer jumping around on their property, like herds of deer. Moose tracks right on their front porch, just walking around the property. You see it on the mud, on the gravel. And, the hunters would be like, yeah, there's no moose and stuff. And I'd be like, yeah, they're on their property. And there's even whooping cranes in the field. If you ever seen male whooping cranes fighting one another, like these giant cranes, it's pretty much Jurassic Park. The way they fight each other, it's like theropods, but obviously herbivorous. Now, after I built the house, I was working with 2 gentlemen, a French Canadian and an angry Hungarian old man. But after we built the house, I started taking shifts at her parents' gas station, and this is where I get the bulk of these cryptid stories from, is working at the gas station, right? Because I'm meeting all the locals. All 1,200 of them. I get gas, right? By meeting all the locals on the reserve, and with a few stories coming directly from her, my ex, and her family, her dad. But before I get into these stories of these cryptids I'm going to mention, I want to illustrate the Anishinaabe, or the Ojibwe culture, a little bit. So you have a little bit background onto why they have these stories and what I'm talking about, and give it some realism, right? Give it some grounding. I want to talk about their superstition and their history, their traditions. I'm not going to get into the creation story too much, but it involves the emergence of the world from a void. So they believed in the void, something space. Beginning with the great mystery, they call it Kichi Manitou. So, maybe like God, right? A great mystery, a source, creating light. Well, that's very similar to the Bible, right? Elements, light, sun, elements, earth, fire, water, before life, and then life, with humans formed from the earth and the spirit. Earth and spirit. Now, this is very interesting, as we now know that we are comprised of our mortal body, this body, our physical body, on this physical 3D plane, or 4D, or whatever you call it, right? What we can touch and see and interact with physically. So that's like what they call the earth. We are formed from the earth. And then the spirit would, now we also know we have a spirit form, right? We all have a spirit mirrored in the higher dimensions, which we cannot see. We can't see the soul. Maybe when we dream we can, when we die. It features Nanabuzu, and the creation of Turtle Island from a mud ball on a turtle's back after a giant flood. There's different versions of this story. Some say a muskrat or whatever brought the earth up from the bottom of the ocean, put it on the turtle's back, which is Turtle Island, Canada, whatever, the earth, land, continental shelves. And this mud is what formed all of us. And this is very interesting too. It's like these people were really ahead of their times. You might think of this mythology as crazy superstition, but if you really think about what they're saying, right? They're bringing mud from the ocean. Where does life all come from? It does come from the ocean, right? We evolved from the ocean. Vertebrates, whatever, fish, turning into amphibians out of the ocean, onto the land, on the turtle's back. And that's how we evolved. It really makes sense to me. So, when have you ever heard of that before? Everywhere. Oh, so I'm talking about the Great Flood. We came, the mud ball on the turtle's back after a Great Flood, right? That's everywhere around the world. There was a Great Flood. Sure, there might have been something before that, but from what we can remember, there was a Great Flood, and then, life started. When have you ever heard that before? Everywhere, right? Nothing Nothing has happened in this world that has never happened before, guys. Our human history alone is so long. I would say a million years or millions of years that the Earth has gone through these processes many times. We've probably been through multiple ice ages. And when I say we, yeah, maybe it's the Homo habilis, Homo Neanderthal. You can watch my previous video. Maybe we were still evolving and mixing and interbreeding, Denisovan, but these processes have happened many times before. In fact, right now we are coming out of an ice age, right? And what happens after we come out of this ice age? There's a warm period, and then we probably go back into an ice age. This all has to do with the way the world spins around the sun, and over time the distance changes. When we get further away from the sun, maybe the way the world tilts, the northern and southern hemisphere, further away, ice age. Closer, warm period. Right? That's the rotation of the Earth around the sun is not, it's consistent, but it's a pattern. It's a consistent pattern of change. We go through interglacial and glacial periods. Right? So when Greta Thunberg says, how dare you create global warming? And, well, yes, we do affect the Earth. Like from my previous videos, you know that I talk about the ecosystem and what we do to the Earth and what we do to the animals. Yeah, for sure. Littering is no good. For sure, carbon emissions, probably not so good, right? But is that the root cause? Are cow farts and ATVs and trucks the root cause of why we're warming, why the winters aren't as intense, and why we have extreme climatic shifts? No, it's not the main reason. It'd be getting warm anyways, right? That's just a reason to take your tax dollars and make our economy weak, right? We might be abiding by these carbon laws and stuff, but what about China? Is China abiding by the same carbon laws? They're making billions of dollars by not abiding by the same carbon laws. All these emissions and coal and stuff. I know China's trying to move forward into the new age, which is good, right? Because they industrialized later than us. We industrialized first. But because we have to agree to the climate summit, we are destroying our economy. And for what? Are we really, is it really affecting the climate, what we do? Not so much. It's very minuscule. If you listen to Randall Carlson, you'll know that the Earth goes through these processions of interglacial periods. And right now, the Earth is naturally warming. Greta Thunberg. So, everything that's happened in this world has happened before. Nothing is new, right? The West is collapsing. Well, the West has collapsed before. Look at Rome. Look at Atlantis. It's underneath the ocean, right? For some reason it flooded and we lost that worldwide civilization. There's better examples. I couldn't think of them, but cultures, civilizations collapsed. Look at the Mayans, the Aztecs. They were very advanced. And then they reach a point where they're so advanced, and then they're so advanced, what's that saying? Strong men create strong societies. Strong societies create weak men. And weak men create weak societies, right? We go through phases. The Persian Empire, right? So we are currently coming out of a glacial period, entering a time of warmth. I don't know, for Canadians, that 20 years ago we used to get 2 meters of snow, right? They had to call in the army to help us shovel the snow and plow the streets and stuff. I do snow removal, and if I had a snow day like that, I'm done. I'm done. I can't do that. These winters are nothing. It's money. Just collecting contracts. Not doing no work. I work 2 times a month. There's no snow. Just watch what will happen to our coastal populations, which is most populations, right? Since we need water to survive, and also ley lines, whatever. So pretty much what I mean is we build our civilizations around water. We need to drink water. We're animals. We're all... Life on Earth we're water-based life forms. Right? We're water-based. Some aren't, but mostly all, like some microbacteria, whatever, they can survive off, like underwater volcanoes and stuff, but most life can't, right? A spider needs water, right? A fish needs water. We need water. So we build, even in the desert, you have to live beside water. You have to dig to find water. You have to collect the dew to drink, otherwise you die, right? You need water. So we build our civilizations around water, and also the ley lines or whatever. It all matches. It's so strange. If you search up the ley lines, it matches rivers and coasts, lakes, water. So we live on these ley lines. All the big cities and stuff are on the ley lines. Toronto, the CN Tower, every major, even small town and stuff, built on these ley lines and on water. We live on shorelines. And if the water rises 1 meter, well, you're going to get some flooding. Well, when the glaciers melt, it's going to rise more than 1 meter, right? When the glaciers melt, there's going to be some isostatic appreciation, which means that the land will actually rise because the glaciers are so heavy. You got a kilometer of glacier in North and South Pole. When that glacier melts and turns to water, first of all, that land rises, right? That's millions of metric tons of ice that's now gone, and the land will actually rise into the air like 500 meters. And, it also dilutes the seawater. When all that glacier melts, the ocean becomes a little bit less salty. But the main thing is that when the glaciers melt, the water levels are going to rise a lot, Countries like Japan will cease to exist. That'll be the new Atlantis, right? In the future, we're going to be diving, and when you swim up to the coast of Japan, well, what used to be the coast of Japan, when you swim in that part of the ocean, and whoa, what is this infrastructure? And it'd be like discovering like an underwater Atlantis. And well, that used to be Japan, right? And then we're all gonna have to take rafts and boats if we're lucky, right? To the Himalayan mountains, the Rocky Mountains and stuff. And that will be the new coastline. Will be the mountains, will be the high ground. Right? Toronto will be flooded. You're going to have to come up to Richmond Hill and stuff. Maybe Richmond Hill might survive it a bit, but Richmond Hill will be like an island. It's a hill, right? Thorn Hill. You're going to have to live on hills. So that's... Right now, with a new LiDAR or whatever technology, we're scanning the ocean bottoms, and we're going to be discovering a lot of things. We're going to be discovering ancient civilizations that have disappeared because of changing ocean levels. I went into that way too much. But, so, what happens when the ice caps melt in the poles, right? Flooding is what happens. So 20th century civilizations will be Atlantis 2.0. We will be the new Atlantis. As we now know, Atlantis was a worldwide civilization, or civilizations. The Egyptian pyramids, all these pyramids are built in a very similar fashion. There's 1,000 pyramids in China. 1,000. They're all over the world. Their creation stories also teach lessons about balance, respect, and community through various tales such as the Sky Woman. Sky Woman. So, right? That sounds familiar. People from the heavens or the stars. Think the Mayan mythology, right? Their gods came from the skies. Sumerian Anunnaki, Enki Enlil, right? Genetic scientists. The Olympians, or Mount Olympus, was in the heavens. The Vedic texts in India. All sorts of Vimanas, they're literally talking about UFOs. Not like helicopters and stuff. Nephilim in the Bible. Right? The Nephilim came down from heaven. They were fallen angels, right? We have Tian Shang in Chinese, which means from the heavens, right? And in Chinese you have Tian, which is heaven, and Di, which is earth. It might be their way of saying like, I don't know, right? But they all talk about the same thing. It's the same story, guys, right? And they also tell of the earth diver myth. So the Ojibwe culture talks about the sky woman and also the earth diver. Earth diver, think of Daring Kuyu in Turkey, right? A shelter, self-sustaining shelter, able to house so many people underground in impenetrable rock. What are they hiding from, right? Some cataclysm? Nuclear fallout? Shambhala and the openings into the hollow earth. When cataclysm strikes, people might take refuge inside the earth. Nothing is new under the sun. We have thousands of highways and infrastructure like storages, shelters, and bunkers underneath the limestone of the Ozarks right now. If you know anything about limestone, it's very porous. You could easily carve through it. Acidic rainwater can carve through limestone, creating caves and channels and underwater river systems, and the Ozarks is full of limestone. The bedrock or whatever, right? Here we have granite in Canada, so that might be a little hard to build underground civilizations, but in the Ozarks in America, on the East Coast, or Central America, whatever, it's perfect for it. So, you guys know that, there's infrastructure down there right now. Miles of it, thousands of miles of it. For the elite. They're built for the elite. Or, I don't know, we don't have access to it, right? Maybe if you're a trucker or you gotta bring something special down there, you might get a little pass and they tell you, hey, don't ever talk about this. But, it's built for the elite after nuclear fallout, right? We're threatening Russia. Or when limestone or when Yellowstone decides to say hello. Oh, I'm back. Right? Well, we're done. We also have ancient Inca tunnel networks underneath Peru called Chincana. Vast underground networks where you can travel from city to city without ever seeing daylight. Maybe they built that because they were trying to escape whatever. Whatever. People or maybe something else. We got Göbekli Tepe, which might have a massive underground infrastructure, right? We only see the tip of Göbekli Tepe, right? And then they got a whole, it's like shaft mines, and those things are huge underground, right? A mine. When I lived up north, there was a mine collapse, Inca mine collapse, and a bunch of people from my reserve, maybe 10 people or so from my reserve, were trapped under there. There was a couple, maybe 20, 30 guys trapped under there, and that was a huge deal, right? Those guys could have lost their lives. A lot of people don't know this, but if let's say the CN Tower is this big. Let's say this is the CN Tower, right? This is ground, and this is the CN Tower. A lot of people don't know this, but these mines, like these Inca mines and whatever, these diamond, copper mines here in Canada, or all over the world, America, it's like that. This is the mine. Like, they got these straight shafts going down, multiple ones, and then they got these side shafts, right? We gotta work. It's a whole... They're massive. So, Göbekli Tepe might have an underground massive infrastructure that's being covered up right now as I speak. They're building on top of them, and they're planting trees over the site. They're covering it up. Once you plant trees over it, right, that's how you're going to get access to it. Trees and roots, and right? Just like the Chinese did with our 1,000 Earth Mound pyramids. They planted trees over our Chinese pyramids, many of which are much larger than the pyramids of Giza, right? Let's say this is the pyramid of Giza, that big. These Chinese Earth Mound pyramids are like massive, and then they grow trees on top of them, so you don't even see it. You don't even know what's there, right? It just looks like a mountain. They don't want you to know our history, because then you go, oh, what? Maybe my government isn't the most, know-it-all. And they don't want you to doubt the powers that be. I sound like I'm fucking crazy. But all around the world are rumors of entrances into the inner earth. Mammoth Caves in Washington, which is not fully mapped. We don't even know how far it goes. All over the Amazon, Shaman's Guard openings in the limestone rock. In the Amazon, it's also limestone, very porous, leading into the interior. In fact, the Amazon used to be interior ocean. That's why species in the Amazon River Basin and in the Amazon are so unique, because it used to be the ocean, and then as the ocean levels dropped, land rose on either side, cutting the Amazon Basin off from the ocean. But that's salt water, right? So over time, that salt water becomes brackish and it gets diluted. That's why in the Amazon you see species of fish and aquatic species that you see nowhere else on Earth. Think about it. We have freshwater dolphins in the Amazon, those pink dolphins. Right? That's because they got cut off from the ocean, and slowly it became more fresh water. We have pufferfish in the Amazon. Pea puffers, right? It's because they were ocean animals that adapted to fresh water from being cut off. Inland oceans, right? We also had an inland ocean here in North America too. Millions of years ago, though. The Amazon one is more recent, I believe. So, we got openings in the Amazon that the shamans guard, leading into the interior. They're sacred sites, and nobody's allowed in them. That's why the shamans guard them. You got Gobi Desert. In the Gobi Desert, there's entrances apparently. Underneath the desert, there's hollow areas. And in Tibet, so where the occult Nazi Third Reich went to solve the mysteries of the Earth, right? The Third Reich, I don't want to say the name, so the Third Reich, they traveled all over the world, right? They were big into the occult. They thought that could give them powers and give them insight to new technology, right? Because what are all these ancient texts telling us, right? Even the Quran, even the Sumerian clay tablets, the emerald scrolls or whatever tablets, the Vedic texts. What are they really saying? They're talking about technology. They're talking about, you got plasma generators in the Vedic texts, unlimited energy. So, the Third Reich was onto something. I can go, but the Third Reich man was looking for immortality, right? when a man becomes so powerful at some point, he has access to anything, right? He has armies, whatever. He has full power, supreme power. What do you want? Just like Genghis Khan. Near the end of his life, what did Genghis Khan want? He wanted immortality. You seek immortality. An old man doesn't want to die. A powerful old man that he doesn't feel fully fulfilled. They'll never fulfill you. Power and money will never fulfill you. I don't want to die. I want to keep doing what I do. So what did Genghis Khan do? Right? He wanted immortality. He spoke to the Dalai Lama at the time. And the Lama told him, there's no such thing, with a modern technology, there's no such thing as immortality, but, just refrain from sex, right? That's how you lose your energy as a man. And you can live a little bit longer. So he was looking for that, and he traveled all over the world. I'm talking about the Third Reich. And he went, to Tibet to try to find openings into the Hollow Earth. So I can go on and on. The world is not what we think it is. Many tribes, like the Choctaws, the Apache in the States, I believe the Blackfoot, I'm not sure, just to name a few, right? They say the underworld became so unbearable. They couldn't live there anymore. So they crawled out through a dark underground passageway. They crawled in these narrow crevices and passageways onto the surface of the world, through a mountain or a mound, or a crack in the mountain, leading from caves into the underworld. They came onto the surface of the earth through a mountain or mound, they have a name for it, or in some, through a crack in the earth. And that's their creation story, is that they crawled out of the earth from the interior. You think some elder just sat there and made this all up? You think you just sat there and, we came out of the earth? Orally passing the story down through tens of thousands of years amongst all its people with perfect recount. Just everyone knows the story in the tribe. In fact, other tribes have the same story, and then there's no delineation from the story. And they just, that's how we were made, right? How we came to be here. Okay, so back to the topic. I'm going very off topic. Near Killarney, there's an animal bypass built over Highway 69. So it's an animal bypass where, animals can cross over the highway because a lot of animals get killed there. It's up north. There's moose, deer, bear. And built this for the animals. And this bypass, painted on it, features animals of the native repertoire of the native animals here in Ontario, right? And it's painted like how natives paint their animals, right? It's like almost like a 2D cross section. And you can see the internal organs or whatever of the animal, right? And on this crosswalk for animals, on this bypass, you see the deer, moose, bear, a lot of them, right? All of them. Rabbit, Bigfoot. Wait, right? This is nothing new. When we hear old accounts of natives describing the local flora, animals, they casually mention Bigfoot, right? They go, in the woods. There's moose, rabbit, bear, deer. I saw some wolves. Yonder, past the bluff. Bigfoot, duck, fox. And the settlers like, wait, what? Bigfoot? What do you mean? Slow down. And they're just like, what do you mean Bigfoot? Yeah. And then there's also like this, raccoon. It's like, hold on a sec. It reminds me of the Chinese zodiac. What year are you born? What year are you born in, huh? We have the rabbit, we have the snake, we have rat, monkey, tiger, dragon, ram, ox, hare, rooster. Wait, what? Hold on. What did you say? Did you say dragon? Right? It's like it was just part of their ecosystem. Right? It's just an animal. Relax. Okay? Even in China, we have the Yeren, which means wild man. You can watch my previous video on that. Or abominable snowman from the Himalayas. Or the Yeti. There's even more names, like Japan's Hibagan. I'm sorry about the pronunciation. We got the Orang Pendek in Indonesia, which has so Indonesia actually has a fascination with giants. I want to cover that. That has to be a whole video later. Every year they have the celebration where they sculpt and make these statues of giants and they parade them through the town. It's fascinating. These lifelike giants, cannibals, eating people. Same story all around the world. In fact, they've compared, so even in the Indonesian folklore, they do this parade because they say a long time ago, these giants would harass us and eat us and stuff. So they do this celebration every year to pay homage, whatever, to these ancient cryptids. We call them cryptids now, right? In fact, they've compared DNA from hair strands from the Asian Yeti to North American Bigfoot. So I think in Tibet, it's like a sacred thing. You know, they got locked up in a thing, whatever, and it's a couple strands of orange hair, and they say it's from Yeti, right? So North American scientists, I believe, took strands of that hair, and compared to strands of hair we found here, to try to sequence and compare, match their DNA from these two different hair strands from opposite ends of the world, right? And when they compared these DNA, the North American Bigfoot or Sasquatch to the Yeti, the results were 100% match. 100% match. They're identical. Right? That'd be like comparing my DNA to the DNA of sub-Saharan. It'd be a match, right? We have the same DNA, just tweaked, right? Certain genes are turned on, certain genes are turned off. All humans can mate with one another, right? That's why we are the same species. We're just like different breeds of dogs, right? There's different breeds of dogs, but they can all mate with one another. It's like a golden retriever and poodle, and you got Dalmatian, you got Rottweilers, right? And you compare the DNA, they're all the same, right? They're 100% match. And likewise, many Native American legends tell of aquatic serpents. Just look at the names of the waterways around Algoma, where I stayed. We have Serpent Lake. We have Serpent Falls. We have Serpent River. They name these places after their life. It's just their life. Things in their life. In fact, the Chinese dragon is historically referred to as Shuilong, translated to water dragon. So the Chinese dragon, whatever adaptation we have it right now with the whiskers, the whiskers make sense, right? And even the way it looks like a water dragon. It has scales and even has like webbing. It has short legs. Why would you need short legs? Well, you don't need legs if you're aquatic, right? Eventually, you don't need legs if you're aquatic. You only have legs because at one point you weren't aquatic. When you look at plesiosaurs, archaeological, right? Plesiosaurs, marine reptiles of the Cretaceous, Jurassic, Triassic, whatever. These aquatic marine reptiles, these long-necked, different plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, even the I'm not good with this stuff, right? The whatever, with the big eyes and looks like a fish. It's a giant dolphin, but it's like the size of even more deadly than a mosasaur, right? They don't even have legs, right? They have paddles. But when you look at the bone structure of the paddles, because we find the fossils, it's got fingers, right? It's got toes and stuff. It's evolving into flippers, right? Because even whales and dolphins, you look at their bones and stuff. They evolved from mammals. They evolved from like a rodent-like looking mammal, right? A somewhat small mammal. So, even here, we all have the same stories. North America and China, right? We have dragons and we have Sasquatches. We have the Yirin, the Yeti, and we have serpents. It's the same thing. When I'm walking and hiking in the woods of northern Ontario with my native ex, that's what we do, right? We explore, catch salamanders, and she likes to catch snakes. I like to catch snakes too. Both her and her dad would. So when we go hiking in northern Ontario, in the national parks, whatever, both her and her dad would be adamant we carry protection. Like, very serious, like, you better bring something. I'm like, okay, I'll bring something. We don't have firearms, right? We're not hunters. Everyone else is, we're not. We don't have firearms license, so we both carry a machete. Real machetes, not some army surplus machetes, like real machetes. When I say, what's this for? Why are we bringing machetes? Like, you have a machete, I have a machete. Like, what's this for? A bear? Yeah, no. I feel safer with a machete when there's black bears, right? When I say, what's this for? A bear? She just goes, yeah, with uncertainty. Like, yeah, maybe more. I don't know. And when I say, what, Bigfoot or something, I'm just, I'm kind of joking around at that time. She just gets uncomfortable. She doesn't say anything. She goes, I don't know, like, stop talking about it. Like, don't say that. As if me saying those words out loud will summon the beast. We're in the woods. And I'm talking about Bigfoot. So apparently I'm too loud in the woods. When I walk around, when I talk, the way I walk, I'm too loud in the woods because I'm a city slicker, right? I'm from the city. I don't know how to walk in the woods. You can track me in the woods. They can track me. What I go, yeah, but you tell me to walk loudly so I don't surprise a mother bear with cubs, right? Sometimes you have to make yourself known. You gotta make some noises and walk loudly because you don't want to accidentally stumble across a sleeping den of bears, a mother bear and her cubs, because then she's gonna go ape. So I thought you told me to be loud so we don't surprise a bear. But I know that she's referring to my arrogant attitude and personality in the woods. I don't have much fear in the woods, right? I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'3", 6'4". I feel like I can handle myself, but that's because I'm an idiot, right? You can't handle yourself against a bear, right? I don't have mace. If I don't carry a machete and the bear wants to do something to me, it's going to do what it wants to do to me, right? Ragdoll me, whatever, right? What's that movie? The Revenant? I'm not the Revenant, right? But I know she referred to my arrogant attitude and personality. Trampling logs. I'm not intentionally, I love nature. I don't try to destroy things, but it's just, right? I'm not from there. I'm trampling logs. There's critters living under there. And little ferns, right? trampling it unintentionally, as if my attitude will bring upon Bigfoot exacting his revenge on our despicable human behavior, right? Bigfoot hides from us. We've destroyed much of its natural habitat. We've destroyed much of nature, right? And that's why nature secludes itself away from us, unless it's a raccoon or a falcon, whatever, pigeons, garbage city animals. She would also get very upset if I said the word Wendigo at night, to the point where it would scare me. So yeah, I casually be talking at night, and I'm not sure why, but when I say, I'm not sure why I would say Wendigo, I'm like, yeah, wow, what is that? Wendigo? I'm just joking, right? But it's at night, we're sitting in a car, and in the woods, I say Wendigo. She says very sternly, don't say that. Like, yo, come on, man. Like, don't say that. Like, she's mad. She's very upset. And then that gets me wondering, like, now I'm looking over my shoulders like, what do you mean? It's just a legend. Now, mind you, this girl she's very brave. She's braver than I am, right? I've seen her do stuff that I wouldn't do, like hop from cliff to cliff, kind of where I go. I'm not gonna do that. I've seen her tackle giant water snakes, like 6 foot long water snakes. And these water snakes, their teeth they're not meant to slice. They're not meant to cut. They're not meant to inject venom. Their teeth are meant to maul, like a bear. Rip and maul. So when she'll like, it's like a swamp, right? They're water snakes, and she'll like jump head first, and grab a snake, and so it's mauling her. So I've seen her tackle giant water snakes like Steve Irwin, Crocodile Hunter. And it's like, while it's mauling the crap out of her arms, she's bleeding. And she's just, she's brimming with joy. She loves snakes. She's like smiling, like, look at this. And I'm like, whoa, it's like blood, And she's handled Massasauga rattlesnakes, snapping turtles, with no fear, Giant snapping turtles, they can, bite you, they got these long necks. You have to be careful when you handle them. She saves them. That's what she does. Like, if we're driving and there's from far away, they look like almost like a raccoon, right? These snapping turtles, if you've ever seen a big one. And what we do is we take them off the road, and we don't want to have them killed. Unalived. I'm so shadow banned. So one day she tells me a story of that of her grandma. So now we're going to get into these stories. One day she tells me a story from her grandma. Her grandma told it to her. She's a prominent native elder. Everyone there knows each other, but they come from a long line of chiefs, right? Her dad, her uncle was the chief. Her grandpa was the chief, and they built the main road leading into the reserve. And she tells me a story where her grandma told her when her grandma was young. Her grandma was walking along the river one day. I assume it's the river that spans the reserve, because the road pretty much follows the river. The river is the boundaries of the reserve. It goes all around it's all water up there, right? It might be one river, 2 rivers, and then Lake Erie, but it's surrounded by water, and the road of the reserve just goes along the river and it circles back, and then maybe there's side roads that come in and out into the mountains, whatever. Even whatever. So I'm thinking it's the main road and the river. So the river spans the reserve, and she's walking on the road, and she looks to her side towards the river off of the road at the shoreline, and she sees a serpent, right, basking on a rock As soon as she sees the creature, animals have good senses. As soon as she looks and sees the creature, it just slides off the rock into the water. Right? And that's the whole story. So, however, in this very short account, there are many details. There are many interesting details. First of all, her grandma was raised in a residential school. She was old enough that she was raised in a residential school since a kid, right? A child. So where they pretty much had the native culture and tradition beaten out of them, right? They're forced to be Catholic. They're forced to be, forced to forget about their tradition and history. They reject their native tradition and mythology. They don't believe in any of that stuff anymore. They're very Catholic. To talk about serpents and Bigfoot is straight up blasphemy. Right? That's the devil. So for her to recount this experience is a little extraordinary, right? For her to talk about a serpent is out of the ordinary. She wouldn't even talk about like simple native traditions and stuff. Secondly, the road that spans the reserve follows the river as it's next to the river, but it's not that close, right? It's still like some lawn, some bush, and then the river, the rocky shoreline of the river. So you're not that close to the river. It's close, but you're not that close. So for her to make out this creature and call it a serpent is interesting. The fact that, because if it was a turtle, you're barely able to make it out, and you know it's a turtle. A turtle is not big enough. And they know they're animals, right? They know what they see, right? I learned a lot about tracking from her. My ex, I learned a lot about tracking from her, right? I'd be like, well, what is that? Is it this? She'd be like, no, it's this. I'm like, oh, right? Sometimes the animal tracks can fool you. Her dad was a trapper. Lastly, it seems very familiar and plausible. This whole story seems very plausible. Being cold-blooded, reptiles need to bask in the sun to warm up their body temperature. What happens when you walk by the basking turtles and snakes? If you're ever walking along a river, pond, lake, and you see turtles, snakes, water snakes, whatever, basking on a log, floating vegetation, on rocks, what happens when you kind of get near them, right? They immediately slide into the water, like red-eared sliders, right? They're afraid of us, right? They just go, all you hear is a little splash, and it's gone. So very similar to that story. The next account I have of perhaps the same cryptid comes from me accidentally overhearing a conversation between her dad and her brother in the kitchen, in the dad's kitchen. They all live very close to one another. Neighbors, they're all neighbors. Her sister, her brother, her dad, our barn, house. It's a house, but it was a horse barn. So, we're in her dad's kitchen, and he was explaining to his son in a hushed tone, not for me to hear, how he was driving on the road next to the river one night when he came across a massive slimy trail across the road and into the river. From what I recount, he must have exited his truck or van to do some investigating. Comes out, looking at it. I heard this hushed conversation, and I couldn't help prodding a bit. Apparently, it was too massive to be the wet trail of a common snapping turtle. Right? Snapping turtles are big, but not that big. There was no mention of serpents, but me being me, studying their body language, and having always been into cryptids like the Loch Ness Monster and many more in Russia, in the States, I read their minds and knew they must have been what they must have been speculating, right? What can it be? It could have been anything, right? A moose or bear or beaver exiting the swamp across the road into the river. But at night, right? It wouldn't just be drops of water. Wouldn't it just be drops of water and not a large slime trail if it was one of these animals? It's wet, right? Like a whole wet trail. Like that of which an aquatic reptile that drags its body, right? It's got short legs, it's made for water. It doesn't suspend itself up on its legs, an aquatic reptile. It drags its body, right? On land. Would make like crocodilians, right? So a crocodile would create a similar wet trail, right? Because its massive body and short legs, it would drag its body and create this trail. When the natives tell their stories, they tell what they see. They are practical and they don't embellish their stories. They don't add anything to it. This is what I saw. I'm not going to speculate. I'm the one here speculating. I'm the one here speculating and categorizing, right? If I'm hearing all of this during my 1 year stint on the reservation, what do you think they see and hear? You know? Now, for my most exciting story, at least for me, since I heard it from an elder as it was going on and got to experience the emotions of it, I will tell you my experience and let you decide what I experienced. I was working at the gas station one night with her dad. Her dad was there when a flustered native elder came in, all wide-eyed, as if scared. Now, I don't know if you know these natives that much, but not much in the woods surprises them. No black bear scares them like this. They're gonna scare me, man. Because I'm an idiot, but they are very stoic, calm, and relaxed. If anything, they love to joke around, have a good time. I love them. I love these people, man. It's just how they are. They've been through stuff. They're tough people, resilient, right? I've been there for quite a bit now, for about a year, and I've seen this gentleman before, so this is strange. I've seen him before. I've seen all these guys before. Her dad and I are both looking at this elder, like, what's up? Like, we didn't say anything, but he comes in like, oh, well, like, what's going on, right? This is weird. He's all wide-eyed, shaking his head, and he tells us his story, barely able to make eye contact, as if stuck in his own head. So he's telling us what's going on, like, blah, 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 and he can't even look at us in the eyes. Usually they're all calm and look at you in the eye, make a joke. Nothing flusters them. So he's telling us the story, not able to make eye contact, shaking his head, and he goes, something's been throwing rocks at my house all night. It's been happening all night. Now, immediately, we're probably all thinking the same thing. We're all thinking the same thing, right? Nobody says anything. Curious George here, I go, how large are these rocks? He just quietly motions. what is this, right? Like, that's a big rock. What is this, the Highland Games? I'm not sure if anything was said after that. He didn't say much. But that was it. He just remained shaken up. That was it. He left. I'm not even sure what he bought. He might have came in and bought something. But he was in and out, right? As if he just came in to talk to somebody about this for a second. Usually you come in and buy some gas or some smokes, right? I don't even remember what he bought. Buying some gas, it takes time, right? I'd have to pump up his gas. I'm a gas jockey. So I didn't pump up his gas. He just bought something, told us the story, and then left. The whole time, her dad didn't say a word. He didn't say a word. I was the one that asked the question, how big are these rocks? He left. You know, her dad didn't even say a word. And her dad is very jolly and extroverted individual, very extroverted. He'll talk to everyone that comes in. I can tell from his face he was worried. I look at him and now he's kind of in his own head. None of us said a word after. I knew by now not to assume out loud about these things. They don't like to talk about these things. I closed up shop. We closed up shop. I went home and told my ex the story, and that was it. She didn't have much to say either, right? I think if he had a son, like if the gentleman that came in all traumatized, I think if he had a son and maybe his son upset the wrong people on the reserve, and this was all a very mean prank. Some young boys are throwing giant boulders at this elder's home. That's a pretty serious prank. That's a pretty serious thing to be doing, right? You can kill somebody, and he would most likely extract this info out of his son. Like, hey, what's going on? Why are people doing this to our house, right? You go up to his son and solve it, right? Also, there might be degenerates on the reserve, but even they have deep respect for the elders. There's rules, right? You don't do that to an elder. That's how you get your ass beaten up. So even I don't think the degenerates would do that. Even them. They're still humans. Come into the gas station. I talk to them. They joke around. I'm the only Chinese guy there, right? They talk to me. Till this day, I've never seen a native gentleman act like that. I've never seen it. With fear, right? When do you see a man with fear? I hear stories of native boys, kids, right? They're kids, native boys, maybe 13 years old, who live in the mountains. They call them the mountain natives, the mountain Indians. And they live in the mountains of the reserve, and they'll snap their arm in half because they're doing some crazy thing, roughing around. They'll snap their arm in half, like break the bone, and they just laugh about it. Go, ha ha! Look, I broke my arm. Ha ha! They don't even go to the hospital. What I'm trying to say is, like, they're tough people, and for an old native man to be so scared like that, something happened that night. Another story is that it's one that the whole reserve knows. So once again, kind of like at the gas station, my ex would tell me, and then, other people say the same thing at the gas station. Everyone knows each other as they are all related. There's like 7-10 families on the reserve. So everyone knows each other. It's a population of 1,200. Just like the town next to them. Small town, right? It's a story about a very short and small elderly lady who comes to the gas station every day. She comes to the gas station every day by foot, or, a lot of people like to pick her up and give her rides. She's a nice lady. She's an elder, right? Young people give her rides. Hey, hop in my car. She comes to play her scratch tickets every day. To put it bluntly, she's not fully there, she doesn't remember, like, my name, whatever. She never asked for it, but, she's not fully there, to say that, whatever. Make it simple. But apparently, she wasn't always like that. From different sources, but mostly from my ex, she was lost in the woods one day when she was just a child. So a long time ago, she's an elder now. A long time ago, she was a child. She was playing in the woods and she got lost. And up north, with a sparse population, like, at nighttime, you don't see light, right? It's not like the city. There's light pollution. There's no light pollution, right? If you're not near the residential houses of the reserve, it's black, right? There's moonlight maybe on a good night, there's starlight on a non-cloudy night. And, it's a sparse population, right? And you can get lost. Dense trees, it's very easy to get lost. And that was a big thing, I was always warned of, because I'm like a tourist, right? Before hiking, is don't get lost. Like, sure, you guys don't get lost. Even seasoned hunters and trappers get lost. They get cold. They get disoriented. When you can't think straight. You're a little drunk. When it snows, everything looks different. The landmarks change. Everything looks different. You can't find your way. They can get lost and lose their lives, even seasoned hunters. I think for a bit, she was lost in the woods as a child, and after a few days, or maybe up to a week, she returned. But she was different after she returned, not all there, like she is now. Rumor has it, the little people got her. As she now talks with an infantile voice. Oh, hey, how are you? Like, more infantile than that. As she, which is common in adults who experience trauma or abuse at an early age, right? The mind protects itself, not able to fully mature and come to reality to face the traumatic events. So the mind protects itself, and what it does is it keeps her locked in this childlike state so she doesn't have to deal with her trauma. This is my speculation, right? I'm not a psychologist. They all say it in a joking way. Oh, the little people got it. Ha ha ha. I'm like, little people. With a smile, with a little smile. She is a nice lady and everyone loves her. She's an elder and commands respect. She still commands your respect. Just like in any culture, right? Whatever. It should not command respect, but, take care of the elder. But it seems a little cruel to say this and embellish it as a joke, right? Why would you make that up? Something like that. Especially since stories of little people that are quite strong and are a common theme in Native stories and folklore. This isn't just, they have accounts of these things for thousands of years. Little people living in caves, hiding in the rock cliffs, underneath waterfalls. They're mischievous, right? Like to play pranks. They can hurt you, they can abuse you. There's even stories of war with the little people. The little people would fight cranes, the whooping cranes. That's like, imagine, was like Jurassic Park. My last story comes from a native man who worked at the gas station with who was a very close family friend of my ex, you know? He's his family. He was a good hunter and fisher, and he knew all the good fishing spots and was supposed to take me with him, but unfortunately he passed away untimely during my stay there. May his soul rest in peace. He knew a lot of his people's history and the land itself. I remember one day standing on the porch of the gas station while he was smoking, and I heard a ribbit, which I'd always heard. I'd always hear this ribbit, outside the gas station. I said something along the lines of, "Oh, a frog." He casually goes, "Nope, that's a crow." With a smile, you know? It was a crow mimicking a frog. And it would do this every day. So being a city slicker, I was dumbfounded, right? And what is it? Like, is it doing that to... I even asked him, you know, is it doing that to prey on frogs? You know? It's a mating call for frogs. And nah, it's just messing around. Anyway, one day I was working at the gas station, and not for the first time, somebody mentions a ghost or a story of a ghost in the gas station. I was like, "Oh yeah, a ghost or whatever." I'm like, wait, you guys always say this. I looked to him for answers. You know, hey, what are you talking about? Not sure of what to believe. Sure enough, him and another employee, they both worked there for a very long time, both recount one or two stories in which they experienced seeing an apparition in the gas station, or heard something, you know, like heard an apparition that they could not explain. They don't like to assume things, you know. The whole reserve is built on a swamp, especially the gas station. It's situated on top of groundwater or a natural spring. There's a lot of natural groundwater coming up from the ground where the gas station is. Sump pumps are constantly running. More than one sump pump is constantly running to make sure that the basement doesn't flood. I'm sure if you live somewhere with a high water table, you know this. It's a constant battle, right? When it rains, it would often flood, and then I have to help her dad with the flooding, right? Mopping it up, working the sumps, getting new sump pumps. Sometimes they're not cheap, right? You keep buying these big pumps. It was a constant battle against the basement flooding due to the high water tables. Her dad explained to his daughter and me, I forget, you know, but he explained, you know, that somehow spirits are drawn to the water. This made the gas station a hot spot for spirits. Lastly, I'd like to share a tidbit about Fort Lacloche and the Lacloche Mountains that I previously mentioned. You know, it's located in the reserve, and Fort Lacloche was a historical Hudson Bay Company trading post where many wars between the French, Iroquois, the Mohawk, and the Anishinaabe, the Ojibwe, were fought. So the French didn't really care. They'd take either side or whatever, the winner. And, you know, they fought over this territory because of its geopolitics, I guess. Just visiting the area and observing the topography of the land, you can see why. From the high vantage point near the fort, it's like a giant hill mountain, you can look southwest and spot potential war parties entering the Georgian Bay from Lake Erie by canoe, obviously. All travel back then is done by canoe. And there's no roads. Can't travel through the forest. That would take much longer. It's not practical. Right? Any travel is done by canoe. Long distance travel. So, it's a good vantage point because it's a scouting point, right? Fort Lacloche guards the waterways needed to access the Hudson Bay to the north. So there's rivers that lead to the Hudson Bay from Fort Lacloche. It's a vital location for trappers and fur traders working for the Hudson Bay Company to access the then untapped lands of the Hudson Bay. So, as the fur trade goes on, they're depleting resources. And, you gotta go up to the Hudson Bay to find the good trapping grounds. And this was a choke point. That's why the fort was built there. Fort Lacloche was the main trading post of the Hudson Bay Company, the main one. It was won over by the Anishinaabe through brutal guerrilla warfare in the Killarney Hills region. And even if you walk through Killarney, the hills and stuff, you can see how they must have fought these wars there, these guerrilla wars behind the hills, over the hills, in the valleys. Thus, the reserve was suitably established there after the Canadian government forced the Anishinaabe from local regions to move and settle there in the swamps. Right? They gathered people from different areas, maybe Manitoulin Island and stuff, and told them, hey, you're living here now on this reserve next to the fort, the old fort. Thus, the reserve was created. Lacloche Mountain, which I have summited, it's not a big mountain, with my ex and her brother, amazing dude, is even more interesting. Lacloche in French means bell. If you strike the rock face of the mountain, it rings and reverberates due to its hollow interior. There are many myths and stories surrounding the mysterious Lacloche Mountains. And that's the end of these stories, my experiences. My parents, including my little sister, came to visit us on the reserve, and one day we were having dinner, and we're teaching them some words. Makwa means bear. Ani means hello. And when we said this, my father says, oh, Ani means hello, right? He goes, oh, that sounds like the Chinese word. We're Chinese. That sounds like the Chinese word Aini, which means love you. Okay. One means hello, one means love you. Sound a little similar. And then we say, miigwech in Anishinaabe. Miigwech means thank you. And he goes, oh, that sounds like, in Chinese, that sounds like mei guan shi. Miigwech. Mei guan shi. Mei guan shi in Chinese and Mandarin means no problem. So thank you is miigwech in Anishinaabe, and you're welcome or no problem is mei guan shi. Means don't worry, no problem. It sounds very similar, right? If there's any linguistics experts out there, I don't know, if you listen, maybe I think my dad was onto something there, and I always remember this. And this is after, if you see my previous videos, this is after my ex and I both have taken our DNA tests. And her being a Ojibwe with a lot of European ancestry, her mom is European. It was surprising to see the amount of Manchurian DNA in her. Manchurian, right? And from my previous videos, my dad is Manchurian, but the Manchurian bloodline, because of the Han and the mixing, racial mixing and whatever, it's very diluted, right? The Manchurian language is extinct. The last Manchurian speaker died maybe 10 years ago, right? The language is lost. All the culture is lost or assimilated into China, right? A lot of Chinese culture right now comes from Manchurian culture, right? There's a dynasty where it was a Manchurian dynasty, right? Manchurians were the nobles or the ruling class. And then they obviously injected their culture into the rest of the Han culture, right? So you don't find anybody in China with 100% Manchurian DNA. In fact, I did my DNA test and roughly maybe I only had 16% Manchurian DNA because my mom is not Manchurian. And then so maybe my dad has 20-something% Manchurian DNA. And so I have 16%. My dad maybe has 20-something% Manchurian DNA. And he says he's Manchurian. He looks very Manchurian. Right? Even I have some features of Manchurian, but my mom is Sichuanese. I'm a half-breed. And then my ex has 8-9% Manchurian DNA. 8 or 9% Manchurian DNA. And maybe she has more than 60% European ancestry, European DNA. So if she has 60% European DNA, how much Manchurian DNA does the original Anishinaabe stock have? That must be upwards of 20-something%, more than me. And then they're also mixing, right? Are you 100% Anishinaabe? There's the Mohawk, Blackfoot, the Cree. Sometimes they mix. Even before her mom with the European DNA, her dad or whatever, is not 100% native either. Maybe she has up to like 70%. I forgot the numbers, right? 70% European DNA, but still with 9% Manchurian DNA. That's a significant portion. So there's something going on with the language, some mistranslation, some lost language here because, come on, Ani. Hello. Aini. Love. Miigwech. Thank you. Mei Guanxi. No problem. There's something here, guys. There's something here. And, alright. This is a long video. Oh. Hope somebody sees this.